Resourceful Designer, episode 63, Winning Over Design Clients.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing.
And now, your host. He likes to mix different cereals in his bowl when he eats breakfast. Mark DeCote.
Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you've been able to join me today as I help you with your graphic design business. I want to share something that happened to me on Friday. And if you're part of the Facebook group, the Resourceful Designer Facebook group, then you already know what happened, what I'm going to talk about here. And if you're not part of the group, you should really join. Simply visit resourcefuldesigner.com/group and it'll redirect you to where you can join the Resourceful Designer Facebook group. Well, I posted on Friday, late morning, I received a phone call from my local printer. It just so happened it's the same printer I used to work for, but I received a phone call from a lady there asking me where the files were for my clients' postcards, because they were holding the press for my postcards and they were anticipating the files. They were waiting for the files and they hadn't received them yet. And my response was, what postcards? I didn't design postcards for my client. In fact, I designed posters for them, not postcards. And then to which she replied, yeah, we know, we printed the posters this morning. To my shock, because my reply was, you printed them this morning? I haven't had them approved yet. All I did was send my client low-res proofs for them to proof and then get back to me before I create the high-res version of the poster. But it turns out that my client sent those low-res proofs off to the printer to get them printed. Luckily, I wasn't doing the printer brokering on this one, so it was my hands were washed of it. I had it clearly in the title, this was a proof, and in the email I sent my client, I said, here is a proof for you to look at. Let me know if everything's okay. I will create the high-res file for you to send to the printer. But they did not listen to me in that case, and they sent them off. But they also told the printer that I was going to be sending over a postcard version with the same information, but a postcard that they can send out as a mailer. And they neglected to tell me. So here the printer calls me up telling me they have the presses are on hold waiting for this file that they were told that they would have Friday morning, and they're calling me up around 11:30 saying, where are the files? And I told them this is the first I ever hear about this job. So anyways, long story short, I did manage to get it. I had all the information. The poster was there, and since even though my client had never actually approved the poster, they sent the file, which I can't believe they did, but they sent it off to the printer, which to me means that it was approved. So I quickly took that information, I was able to shrink it down into a postcard, and I did send it off. This time I sent a high-res proof or a high-res file, print ready, off to my client. And I told them, I said, listen, here it is. I hadn't heard about any of this. If this file is okay, then send it off. And next thing I knew, I got a message from the client saying that everything was good, and they sent it off to the printer. So that was my Friday afternoon. I ended up designing a postcard that I didn't know was coming. And wow, that was an interesting time and something I don't really like to do. Especially it messed up my afternoon because I had some other things planned and I ended up having to do that postcard. And I know some people would say, well, if I had a client like that, I'd just fire him. But you know what? This woman that I do this work for, I've been doing work for her for years. And this is, I believe, the 5th company that she has worked for. She's moved from company to company. And I'm the only graphic designer she wants to work with. So every time she's at a new company, she gets me to do work for them. And then when she moves on to her next company for some whatever reason, the previous company stays on as one of my clients. So I can tell you right now that 5 of my good clients all came because this woman worked with them. So yeah, I have a hard time staying mad at her for that reason, because I'm making some really good money off her previous employers who are still good clients. So anyways, that's how my day or my week finished off last week. And I just thought I'd share that with you. Funny story. And as I said, I discussed all of this and we talked all about it in the Facebook group. So if you're not part of the group, you missed out on that and so many more other conversations that are going on in the group. Some great people in there. Only people that listen to this podcast. I don't advertise that Facebook group anywhere. It's not on the website. I don't send it out in my email list. I don't promote it on social media. The only place I ever mention that group is on the podcast so that I know that everybody in the group is a podcast listener. So if you're listening to the podcast and you want to join the group, just visit resourcefuldesigner.com/group and ask to join, and I'll be happy to let you in. Now, I want to share another resource of the week with you this week. And this week's resource is a website called Website Grader at website.grader.com. And what Website Grader is, it's a simple but effective tool to see how your website stacks up performance-wise. It measures the overall performance, the mobile performance. It looks at the overall SEO of your site as well as the security of your site, and it gives you advice on how to improve them if it sees any faults with them. It also gives you an overall score for the site. So you can check out your sites, your client sites, your competition site, or whatever you want. And it's absolutely free. Yes, at the end, they ask you if you want to join some program or something, but you don't have to. It's just to give you a quick, this is not an in-depth analysis of your website. It's just a quick measure on, is there any areas lacking in your website that really should be addressed? I ran Resourceful Designer through it, and I'm going to be looking at my caching because my caching is not quite up to where it should be. So I'm going to be looking at improving that over the next little while. But that's the resource I'm sharing with you this week, website.grader.com. Check it out. And now our main topic, winning over design clients. Let's face it, we live in a dog-eat-dog world. Not only are we competing with other designers in our area, but nowadays we're also competing with design contest sites, crowdsourced designs, as well as some cheap alternatives where people are offering design services for as little as $5. So what are we as designers supposed to do? Well, my answer is don't fret. There's still plenty of work to go around, and there are a lot of people and a lot of businesses out there looking for designers just like you. But how are these people supposed to know that you're the right designer for the job? Well, again, the answer is simple. You show them. You see, it all comes down to a kind of what I like to call subliminal warfare. You see, whenever you meet somebody, subconsciously, there's kind of an internal battle that goes on between you and that person that you're meeting. When you first meet somebody for the first time, you're each sizing each other up in order to form that first impression of them. What does the person look like? How do they act? How do they compose themselves? What do I like about this person? What don't I like about this person? Is this somebody that I think I can get along with? All these questions and so many more go through both of your heads while you're conversing. So while you are weighing up your quote-unquote opponent, it's also up to you to provide favorable answers to those questions that they're thinking about you. So what I've done is I've put together a few tips to help you stack the odds in your favor and to improve your chances of winning over design clients whenever you're talking to them, whether it's on the phone, through video conference, or you're meeting them face to face. So here are 8 tips for you to follow if you want to win over clients. Tip number 1, dress for success. Whether you're meeting through video or you're meeting in person, obviously this doesn't apply if you're just talking to somebody over the phone. But whenever you're going to be seeing that person, whether through video or face to face, you need to dress professionally, but also appropriately. So this does not necessarily mean wearing a suit to every client meeting. In fact, if you dress too nice, you could lose some points in the client's eyes. Have you ever met somebody and felt intimidated by them because they were dressed way better than you? Like maybe you weren't at some function. You were just maybe out shopping at the mall and you came across somebody and they're wearing a suit. Subconsciously, it's possible that you might feel intimidated a little bit because of the way they're dressed. Well, that's the last thing you want a client to feel when you show up for a meeting is that you're dressed way better than them. They might feel intimidated, which automatically gives them negative ideas about you, or I'm talking subconsciously here. They might not think about it, but in the end, they might say, well, maybe this person's not really a good fit. So the idea is to do some research beforehand. Research your client and see what type of person they are so that you can try to coordinate your attire to match their preferences. If you're meeting the CEO of some huge investment firm, yes, you're going to wear a suit. But if your potential client is the inventor of some new electric skateboard, let's say, well, you're not going to go in there with a 3-piece suit to talk to this person. You're going to dress casual, but still professional. And that's the idea. You always want to be professional. You're never going to go to a meeting in ripped jeans and a graphic t-shirt. You're going to want to dress properly, but you don't want to be overdressed. Because as I said, that could intimidate the person. And especially if this is a meeting to see whether or not you're going to be a good match and you guys can start working together. If you're overdressed and you can intimidate the person because of it, they might decide not to hire you. So do some research. Now, women, I have to say, you ladies have it much easier than us men. Because when we dress, we kind of pick out what we need in the morning, and we're kind of stuck with that. If we go into a meeting and we find out that we're overdressed, there's not much we can do. Same thing if we're underdressed, there's not much we can do. Ladies, I find, and the only reason I know this is because my wife from time to time would watch some of these clothing shows on TV where they show these people, getting a whole new wardrobe. And I know that sometimes a lady can have a dress that can be very casual, the type of dress that you would wear going out to the grocery store or something like that. But then it's just a matter of changing her shoes and maybe throwing a blazer on, and that dress would rock the boardroom. So in my opinion, I think ladies have it a little bit easier than this. I mean, you can wear something with a nice blazer, and if you find that you're a little bit overdressed, you simply remove the blazer, throw it over your arm, and you're more casual to go into the meeting, depending on what it is. Where men, we have to do a little bit more research, because if you go into a meeting and you realize that, nobody here is wearing a suit, sure, you could take off your suit jacket and maybe even take off your tie. But to everyone around, it still looks like you're wearing a suit. You just took the jacket and tie off. So we have to do a little bit more research. But that's tip number 1, is dress for success. Not necessarily dress very nicely. I mean, you should always be dressed nice, but you don't need to be wearing a suit. You should just be dressed for the job, the people you're going to meet. And whether that is a 3-piece suit, or maybe it's just some nice pants and maybe a polo or golf style shirt or a nice plaid button down shirt. It doesn't matter. Just as long as you are dressed nicely, but to the appropriate level of your client. Now, tip number 2 is whenever you meet somebody, call them by their first name. Now, I know this goes against some of the stuff our parents might have taught us about respecting your elders. And if somebody is older than you, or maybe a higher up, or whatever, you call them Mr. or Mrs. so-and-so. But what you got to remember is you're going into a meeting here. You're both business people. It doesn't matter if the person you're meeting is a startup or the person you're meeting is the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You're both business people. And as such, you are kind of on equal grounds there. And you got to remember that the whole point of the meeting, of you meeting them, is for the two of you to work together. It's not for you to work for them. Unless you're going in there as for a meeting in order to be hired as an employee, then yes, that would be the case. But if you're going in there because they want to hire your firm to do some design work for them, then you're going in there as equals. So treat them as equals and use their first name. Now, this will accomplish a couple of things. As I said, first of all, it puts you on even ground. If you go into a meeting and they say, like, hi, Mark, and I say, hi, Mr. whatever, so-and-so, or Mrs. so-and-so, automatically, we've positioned ourselves that they are higher up than I am. And I now have a harder time in order to become at their level so that we can be equals. And if you go into a meeting and you say, hi, Mr. whatever, Mr. Smith, and the person says, oh, please call me Mike, they've just given you permission to use their first name, which now you're on a first name basis. But by them having to give you permission, that's, again, giving them the authority, saying, I'm higher up than you, but I'm going to allow you to use my name. And you don't want this, because remember I said this is subliminal warfare. We don't realize this stuff is going on, but in the back of our mind, there's a lot of stuff going on when we meet somebody for the first time. So whenever you're going into the meeting, it doesn't matter who I'm meeting. I'll go in there and I'll say, hi, Sally, hi, Mike, hi, Carol, hi, Tom, whoever it is. I don't worry about their last names because I want to go in there on an equal level. We are going to be partners. We're going to work on this together. I'm not working for you, and I don't expect you to bow down to me. We're going in as equals, and therefore I will use their first name. So that's tip number 2. Whenever you go in to meet with somebody, regardless of their age or that, call them by first name. Now, sticking along the whole thing about names, tip number 3 is to get to know the names of the people that work around the ones you're meeting with. And not just get to know them, but use those names. Whenever you're using someone's name, it can be very powerful. It means that you made the effort to remember it. And it can make that person feel good about themselves. And it makes them take notice of you. Have you ever been at a restaurant? And I mean, most restaurants, when you sit down and a waiter or waitress comes to the table, they usually start off to say, "Hi, my name's so-and-so, I'll be your waiter." And then it goes from that. And then most people will just never bother with that. They don't remember the waiter or waitress's name, and they'll ask for stuff like, say, you need a glass of water. And you'll just call the person, "Oh, excuse me, can I get a refill on water here?" And yeah, that person, it's their job. They'll get you the refill on water. But if you raise your hand and say, "Excuse me, Tom," or "Hey, Sally, can I get some more water here?" That person will all of a sudden go, "Hey, they remembered my name." And it'll make them think more favorable of you because you remembered their name, and they might give you some better service. I always make a point of using somebody's name. If I'm in line at the grocery store and I see a name tag on the person, whether it's a 12, 13-year-old person or an older gentleman or lady, if I see a name tag, I will always call them my name. I'll get up to the checkout in the grocery line and I'll look at the name tag and I'll say, "Hi, Carol, how you doing? How's your day?" And first of all, sometimes it's kind of funny because they kind of look at you like, "Hey, how do you know my name?" And then they realize the name's on their thing. But the fact that I use the effort to say their name, all of a sudden, the service and the way they perk up, they smile, they stand up a little bit taller, and they engage in conversation a little bit better. And at the end, I go, "Oh, well, thanks a lot, Carol. Have a great day." And I walk away. I know most of the names of almost all the grocery tellers at my grocery store. I know every name of the bank. When I go into my bank, I know the name of every teller there. I also make a point anytime, like if I get into a taxi or an Uber or something like that, Uber's great because right on your phone, it'll tell you what the driver's name is. And taxi, they usually have their name somewhere on the dashboard that you can look at. And I'll just call them by name. "Hi, Tom, this is where I'm going to, whatever." And you know what? First of all, if you get into a taxi or an Uber and you don't know like the person's name, ask them, "Oh, how do you pronounce your name?" And just the fact that you ask them, they acknowledge that. Now, I could tell you a story. When I was in Chicago last year and I had an Uber taking me back to the airport, and I got in conversation with the guy. The guy's name was Ben. And as soon as I got in, I looked over. It says, "Hey, Ben, how you doing?" And we started talking and all that. By the time we got to the airport, there was a place where Uber drivers are supposed to drop off their passengers. But where they drop them off, there's still a little bit of walk to get to the terminal where you have to check in. But this guy, I don't know if it was because of that, but I kind of think because I got on good terms, I was calling him by name and all that. He actually went and parked where he wasn't supposed to so that I wouldn't have to walk so far. So sometimes you can get little perks like that. Now, the reason I'm saying get to know the people is because of, especially if you're at a business where they have a receptionist, you want to become friendly with the receptionist because you don't know that receptionist may have an opinion to share with their boss. Maybe their boss will come out after the meeting and just ask them, "What do you think of that person?" Well, if you were the type of person that just walked in and said, "I've got a meeting with so-and-so," and the receptionist just said, "Okay, well, have a seat. I'll see if he's available or whatever," as opposed to somebody that comes in and says hi and whatever. If there's a name plaque or there, hi, Sally, hi, Tom, I've got a meeting with so-and-so. Are they available? Just the fact that you call them by name, they will become more associated with you. Same thing when you phone somebody up. If you phone somebody up and the receptionist answers and you just say, "Hi, is Bill available?" or "Can I speak to Bill?" Well, they might say, "Well, Bill's busy right now. Can I take a message?" or something like that. But if you call up and say, "Hi, Carol, it's Mark here. I was just wondering, is Bill available?" Well, now Carol, or whether it's Tom, or it doesn't matter who's the receptionist, that person might all of a sudden think, "Oh, hi, Mark." But, I acknowledge them. "Hi, Mark. Yeah, well, they're busy right now, but let me see if they'll take your call." And so always make it a point to get to know the people that are around there. If there's a doorman at the building, get the doorman's name. If there's security, get the security's name. Wherever you are, as you're going around, try to get the names of everybody. Remember those names and use them. It goes a long way in building that relationship. And I'm really big on customer relationships. Well, sometimes the client that you're meeting with will ask the opinion of those around them. And if those people think more favorably of you, there's a good chance you get the job. Now, tip number 4 is for when you first come up and you meet somebody. Tip number 4 is put your hand out first. Shaking someone's hand is an old age tradition when you greet somebody. I mean, of course, this depends on where you live in the world. Some places in the world, it's actually taboo to shake somebody's hand. But I live in Canada here, and in North America, people shake hands. And what I'm saying is, don't wait for them to offer to shake your hand. You put your hand out first. First of all, by doing so, you're showing confidence, you're showing some authority, and it shows that you're serious about meeting them. And a lot can be learned by a handshake. So if you're not comfortable, or if you don't know if you have a good handshake, learn. Ask somebody to help you and learn how to shake a hand properly. And this goes for both men and for women. Now, I'm not talking about the bone-crushing, super hard and shake. It just has to be a nice, firm handshake. And you can get this for both men and women can do this properly. And again, this is all social warfare. A weak handshake, if you go in there and you have a weak, limp handshake, can do more to harm you than anything you can say in a conversation, because subconsciously, people could remember that and think, well, this person didn't really show confidence. They were a little bit timid in their handshake. I don't know if I want to work with somebody like that. But if you go in with a nice, solid handshake, then right off the bat, you're establishing that I have confidence. I'm not timid. I'm showing some authority. And yes, we are people that can work together. So that's tip number 4. Put your hand out first. Don't wait for them to offer to shake your hand. You put yours out first and offer them a nice, solid handshake. Now, tip number 5 is anticipate questions and answer them before they're asked. Whenever you're going to meet with somebody, I do hope that you're doing some prep work. You're not just going to say, okay, I have a meeting, I'll just show up and see what happens. No, you should be doing some sort of prep work. And that prep work should involve trying to think of whatever questions the client may have to ask you. Now, of course, you can't anticipate every question because you might not even know what the whole meeting is about, but you want to have the basic questions already answered. And whenever you're presenting or you're talking to the client, you bring them up and answer those questions before the client has a chance to ask them. This will show that you are knowledgeable about the subject. You are a thinker. You are a valuable asset because you're a problem solver. If the client had a question and you come out and ask it or answer it before they even asked, you've just solved the problem for them because obviously they didn't know the answer. And by being a problem solver like that, they will think much higher of you than if they had to ask everything. Now, you're obviously not going to be able to answer every question or anticipate every question, but you should have answers ready for just about anything. And if they come up with a question that you didn't already answer yourself, then give them the best answer you can. And if the best answer you can is I don't know, don't be afraid to say that. You can say, I don't know that answer, but I will look into it and get back to you. There's no harm in saying that. In fact, by saying I don't know, it shows that you're not afraid to admit that you don't know something. Some people are so afraid and they'll actually try to come up with answers for stuff because they're afraid to sound stupid or to sound like they're not confident or they don't know what they're doing. But in fact, saying, I don't know, but I will get back to you or I will find that out and let you know. By saying, I don't know, it shows confidence that I'm okay. I don't know all the answers, but hey, I'm willing to work at it. I'm willing to find out and we can still work together. Now, tip 6 is use we instead of something like you and I. Talk as if you already have the job. Even if this is not an interview, but a meeting to see whether or not you are a good fit or whether or not they're going to hire you, talk to the client as if they've already hired you. Never say something like, if you hire me, then we can do this. Instead, use something like, once we're working together or once we're working on this, then we can do this. Make it sound like we're already working and it's just because we haven't started yet. You've already hired me, but we haven't actually started the job. So once we get working on this or once we get going on this is what we'll do. Or if you start talking about little aspects of the job, you can say stuff like, well, we can do this here, maybe we can adjust this layout. We can do this here. Don't say I can adjust this, or don't say, maybe you can do this, or this sort of stuff. You guys can do this. You're not offering advice, and you're not saying that you're going to take over. You're creating a partnership. So it's all, we are going to do this. Let us do this. And by doing that, you are inviting them to a partnership with you. And it, again, subliminal warfare, they will automatically start thinking that we are already working together by the words, the vocabulary that you use. If you keep telling them that we are doing this is what we are doing, in their mind, they're starting to think, yeah, that's what we're doing. And they will be much more inclined to continue on after the meeting's over. They'll continue on with you. So that's tip number 6. Use we instead of you and I. Now, tip number 7 also goes along the same thing with vocabulary. And this is actually something I learned, and you parents out there might want to pay a little bit close attention. This is actually something I learned from a children's book, or not a children's book, but a parenting book about children. And I can't remember if it was John Gray. John Gray is the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. But he also wrote another book called Children Are From Heaven. And I can't remember if this came from his book, or I also at the time I had read a book by Barbara Coloroso, which was entitled Kids Are Worth It. And one of them said this is, never use can or could. Always use will or would. And when I read this, I remember thinking, well, that's really crazy. But at the time I had, I forget how old my kids were. They were something like 7 and 10, or maybe whatever, 8 and 11, something like that. And I started using this, and I was amazed at the transformation. And what I'm talking about here, and again, I'm talking about the whole kids things, but this actually translates into everything. Since I learned to use this with my kids, I use this everywhere, and it's amazing the response you get. And don't ask people if they could do something. Ask them if they would do something. If you are a parent and you ask your daughter or your son, say something like, can you take out the trash? Well, it's like butting heads, especially if they're in that early teenage years. They might go, yeah, of course I can. And then they never end up doing it. Or can you clean your room? Or can you put away the dishes? Whatever it is, they don't want to move, and you get frustrated. But all of a sudden, if you start, instead of saying, can you, you say, will you? And all of a sudden they get up and they do it. And it's almost like magic. And if you're not a parent and you've never tried this, give it a shot. I know it sounds crazy and you're saying, Mark, you're exaggerating, but it actually does work, because a couple of things happen whenever you say ask somebody can or could. First of all, you're questioning their ability. Can you take out the trash? What do you mean, can I? Of course I can. I'm not a baby. I can take out the trash. Can you clean your room? Well, yeah, I can clean my room anytime I want. Why are you asking? You're questioning their authority. Can you? And sometimes by doing that, they tend to resent the question. Well, yeah, of course I can clean up my room, but I don't want to clean up my room. Now, you didn't actually ask them to clean up the room. You just asked them, can they do it? And a lot of times, some kids will actually come out and say that. And when later you say, you didn't clean your room. Well, you never asked me to. Sure, I did. No, you just asked me if I could. You didn't ask me to actually do it. Well, if you change that to, will you clean your room? All of a sudden, it's still a question. But now they have to actually think. It's like, if they say no, they can't just say no. Like, then they have to give a reason. Why would I say no when he or she says, will you clean your room? No. Well, I don't have a good answer for no, so I might as well go clean my room. And it's just amazing. As I said, when my kids were young and I switched from using can or could and started using will or would, all of a sudden things started getting done. And what I'm trying to get at is using that sort of vocabulary with clients has the same sort of effect. If you're this is more after you've got the job. I'm not talking about when you're trying to get the job, but say you get a client and they're supposed to give you content. They're supposed to send you image files. They're supposed to send you whatever. Instead of saying, can you do this? Ask them, would you or will you do this? And you'll see a much bigger response or a much faster turnaround time on when you get the stuff. Instead of saying, can you send me the files tomorrow? Ask them, would you send me the files tomorrow, please? And there's, as I said, a lot less chance of you not getting the files. So try this. Whenever you're dealing with suppliers, you're dealing with contractors, you're dealing with clients, you're dealing with your spouse, you're dealing with your kids. As I said, I read this in a book, and if that's the only thing I got out of that book, it was worth its price in gold, because over the years, I've used this so many times, and I was amazed when I started doing it, the transformation in both my kids. So give it a try and see how it works for you. Now, tip number 8, the final one, very simple, and that's simply smile. When you're going in to meet somebody, smile. Yes, it's a serious meeting. You want to be serious. I'm not saying go in there joking and being crazy, but just a simple smile can go a very long way. And that can go with the doorman, with the receptionist, with the person you're meeting for, with anybody. If you smile at them, it makes their day. It makes them feel better about you. It makes them remember you. You're the person that smiled at them. And again, as I said, who knows? You don't know if the person you're meeting with is going to ask their receptionist. They might even ask the doorman, hey, what do you think of that person? And just that simple smile might make all the difference, where that person said, they seem like a really nice person. You know, as opposed to somebody who comes in and doesn't smile, and they might not have anything good to say about that person. Once again, it all comes down to subliminal warfare. What is being thought? And sometimes the things that are being thought are not even at the top of your mind. They're all happening subconsciously. People don't even realize that they're thinking about these things as they're thinking about them. We've become so ingrained with the way we meet people to automatically go through this whole process without even thinking about it. And you know it's true. You can go, say you're at a gathering somewhere and somebody introduces you to somebody else. It just takes a few seconds for you to determine whether this person is somebody you want to find out more about, or if you are not interested in this person at all. I'm not saying that you'll know the person right away, but it doesn't take long for you to make a decision on whether you want to get to know that person more. And that all comes down to a lot of these tips that I was telling you. The way they present themselves, the way they talk, the way they shake your hand, the way they're dressed, the way they stand. Everything about them in a flash, in an instant, will flash through your mind, and you make a decision right there on the spot. Is this somebody I want to get to know more, or that I should be talking with, or I've got no interest in talking to this person? And that's the whole point of today's podcast episode, is you want to create the best possible outcome whenever you're meeting with somebody, because that outcome could mean the difference between you getting a job and you not getting the job. Because not every job comes down to price. I know for a fact, I've been told many times over the years that I was hired for a job because the people liked me, and I was not the cheapest person. There was people that came in that I underbid. There's even jobs where I was the highest bidder on the job, but they liked me and decided they wanted to work with me. Now, that won't always be the case. Sometimes they have no choice. They have to go with the lowest bidder, in which case you do lose out. So even if you follow all these tips, there's no guarantee you'll get every job, but you want to stack the deck in your favor. So by following these 8 tips, you have a much better chance of succeeding. And I'll just go over them quickly once again. Tip number 1 was dress for success. Tip number 2, call the person by their first name. Tip number 3 is get to know the names of the people they work with and use those names. Tip number 4 is put your hand out first to shake hands. Tip number 5, anticipate questions and answer them before they get asked. Tip number 6 is use we instead of you and I. Tip number 7, use will or would instead of can or could. And finally, tip number 8 is smile. And that's what I wanted to discuss in today's podcast. Now, do you have any tips for meeting clients for the first time and that you would like to share? If so, I would love to hear about them. Please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 63 and leave a comment in the show notes. And now, this week's question of the week. And this week's question comes from Suvi. It says, does it matter where I buy my domain names? I live in Australia, and some Australian domain name sellers are very expensive. And sometimes I feel tempted going to cheaper route, for example, GoDaddy. Does it make a difference where I buy the name from if I already have hosting elsewhere? I'm especially talking about those extra domains with similar spelling to my domain that I would like to register. Well, thanks for the question, Suvi. And the short answer is no, it doesn't matter. You can buy your domains from anywhere you want and just have them directed. But you have to make sure that wherever you do buy the domain from, they have to allow you to do both domain forwarding and they have to allow you to specify your own name servers. Now, domain forwarding is great for those secondary domains. If you want alternate spellings, or if you're going to use say you're in Australia, so you have the .au domain, but you also want the .com and the .net, but you're going to use the .au as your main domain. Well, the other domains, as long as wherever you buy them allows you to forward the domain, and that means that if somebody types in yourdomain.com and hits enter, it automatically takes them to yourdomain.au. So as long as the place offers domain forwarding, then you're good in that sense. Now, you want to also be able to specify your own name servers, and that's in case you want to redirect the domain. Like say you have you register a .com somewhere, and all of a sudden you have hosting somewhere else. You want to be able to say that that domain at GoDaddy is pointing to the websites that's hosted on HostGator or wherever. And that you need to be able to specify your own name servers. Now, most domain registrars will already offer that service, so I wouldn't worry about it too much, but look into it because, yeah, you can find cheap places. I know GoDaddy offers, I forget what the website is. It's $1 domain or dollar domain or something like that. And there's sometimes, you can't always get them, but you can register domain names for $1. Now, that's for the first year. The next year, then you have to pay more for it. But yeah, there's nothing stopping you from finding a cheaper place to register the domains. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that not every domain seller will offer the extensions. Like I know I'm in Canada, and the place that I use in Canada, which is called namespro.ca, is where I register all my domains through. Well, I cannot register an Australian domain. I can't register a .au domain. Just like I don't believe anybody outside of Canada, you can't register a .ca domain. Now, I'm in Canada, so I have no trouble. I have no problems whatsoever registering a .ca domain. But somebody that's listening from the US, you might have an issue because you're not in Canada. You might have a problem registering a .au domain name. Or sorry, a .ca domain name in Canada. Well, it's the same thing for you in Australia, Suvi. If you're looking at getting the .au, you might have to register that in Australia. I didn't look into it. I don't know if that's the case. I know that here in Canada, I can register a .uk domain name, but I can't register a .au. So at least not through this provider. I could probably go to some other provider and maybe get it. But whenever you do look for someplace cheaper in order to register, then look at that and see whether or not they offer all the extensions that you want. I know I mentioned a couple of podcasts ago that the new vanity domains, like I have the .design, I have resourceful.design is one of my domains, and all that does is redirect to resourcefuldesigner.com, but I registered it, I don't know why I did, just for the fun of it, just to have it. But the place I registered it, I think it cost me $25 to register that domain. But I found another place that if I want to register the .design, they're charging $45, so $20 more than what I paid for mine at the I forget the name, a pork bun dot something. I forget it. Sorry, I should have really looked that up, but that's where I got mine. And be careful is what I'm trying to get at. Is you can register from anywhere, but just look at the prices. But yes, you can register them anywhere you want and have either the domains forwarded, or you can specify the name servers and direct the domain to the website. Now, there is, of course, a lot more involved than that. You're going to have to look in at whether you're using the mail servers and all sorts of things just to make sure. But the short answer of the whole thing is that, yes, there's nothing stopping you from finding a cheaper place outside of Australia to register your domain names. So I hope that answers your question, Suvi. Now, if you would like your question answered in a future episode of the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and submit your question there. Now, before I go, I want to share another great review I received. This one is in Canada and came from Karmatorium. It says, I've been listening to this podcast since I started my graphic web design business in June of 2016. This is perfect for people who are beginning or are well into their design career. It covers all topics from cruddy clients not paying to what should be in your portfolio. 5 stars. I'm listening from Newfoundland, Canada. Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Love getting these reviews, especially these 5-star reviews. And if you would like to leave a review for the podcast, which I love getting and I will read on the podcast here, if you would like to leave one of these reviews, simply visit resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes, and that'll redirect you to the iTunes store in your country. So if you're in Canada, it redirects you to iTunes Canada. In the US, it redirects you to iTunes US. In Australia, wherever you are, it'll redirect you to the iTunes store in your area. And you can just click on the Leave a Review tab and leave a review for the podcast. It would be much appreciated. And before I go, I want to remind you of this week's resource, which is website.grader.com, where you can go in and have an evaluation of your website done free of charge. So thank you very much for joining me this week. I look forward to the next podcast. Not sure yet what I'll be talking about, but I'll have fun doing it regardless. Until then, I wish you all the best with your graphic design business. I am Mark DeCote, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.